Hi everyone, I'm Angela, and this is going to be my April and May reads ranked from worst to best. I read 19 books between April and May, and I'm excited to talk about all of them. I only had one that I actually disliked, and the rest I at least mostly liked. So let's get into the books. I'm going to try to keep the synopses short and mostly focus on my thoughts. Coming in at number 19 at a 2.5 star is Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. No one is sadder than me to be disliking an Emily Henry book. I have given all of her romances 4 stars and above. This one is a bit of a departure from her usual rom-com formula because we have a large portion of this book which is focusing on the story of a character who is not one of the romantic leads. So our 2 romantic leads are 2 writers who are competing to write the story of this famous heiress who has been kind of in seclusion away from the world for years, and now she is ready to tell her story. So we're getting both this woman's story and the story of these 2 main characters falling in love, and they're on this little island in Georgia. That's the main vibe of this book. My main problem with this book was twofold. Basically that Margaret's story and the story of her family was boring. It was uninteresting. I didn't see any reason why this woman needed a book written about her. She was just a girl from a rich family who didn't do very much and was not special in any way. And second, that the romance was very flat and happened way too fast. I didn't feel anything between these characters. It was just they're 2 hot people in the same vicinity. So 2.5 stars. I still love Emily Henry's writing in general. I think she is really, really intelligent, and I will read more from her, but maybe I won't buy her next release for $30. At number 18 out of 3 star, we have Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales. This is the 3rd and final book in the Emily Wilde trilogy, which is this kind of whimsical, fantastical, light academia series about Emily Wilde, who is a fairy scholar, and her friend Wendell Bambleby, who is a fellow professor at the college where she works, and they go on these adventures doing field work, trying to study fae. And Wendell may or may not have more to him than it seems at first glance. There may or may not be a romance. I loved the first book in this series. I gave it 4.5 stars. And then book 2, I was kind of in denial about how bored I was. I just felt like it was so incredibly similar to the first book. It just kind of felt like a copy and paste in a different setting. And so I decided to just read book 3 as an audiobook while commuting to and from my new job. Yes, I'm employed now, everyone. Everyone clap for me, clap for me. So it was just a book that I knew I wasn't going to absolutely love and be obsessed with, so I felt okay just listening to it as an audiobook while I was driving, and I had a fine time with it. I don't have super strong feelings one way or another. I do really like Heather Fawcett's writing. I just felt like this series for me, I could have stopped at book 1 and been completely fine. At number 17 at a 3.25 star, we have The Beast of Bezek by Amelie Howard. I read 3 historical romances between April and May, and I think that the order that I read them in really determined the ratings. I think if I would have read them in a different order, these ratings would be different because they are so similar, and I only rating them lower as I went on because the novelty was gone. I found this book while looking through a list of BIPOC historical romance authors, and I found Amelie Howard, who also has a new fantasy romance book out that I might try. Basically, this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling set in Regency England. We have a main male character who is very, very scarred from fighting in the war, and we have a female main character who needs to take refuge with him in his large manor because she and her sister are running from this evil man who is kind of trying to entrap her sister into marriage. This was the 3rd historical romance that I read, so again, I think if I had read this first or second, it might have been higher, but I had a nice time with it. It hit all the plot beats and had everything that I wanted in historical romance. It just wasn't amazing, but it was fine. I was not disappointed at all. It was just kind of a good, fine time. Coming in at number 16 at 3.25 stars is Romancing the Duke by Tessa Dare. This is the second historical romance book that I read. This one is extremely similar to the last historical romance I just talked about because we also have a main male character who is extremely scarred from the war. Apparently this is like a common trope in historical romance. I didn't know that. And so he feels like very unlovable. He's very grumpy and jaded and like hurt by all of the, negative attention that people give him because of his physical appearance that can be quite jarring and unpleasant for people to look at. If you're wondering if these books really talk about ableism and stuff, no, they do not, so keep that in mind. Our main female character is a woman whose father has just died and she is kind of destitute, and she gets this letter that she has to meet some lawyer guy or another at this castle, and she shows up and she discovers that she has inherited this castle, and the main male character is like literally living in this castle, and he's like, this isn't my castle. You haven't inherited shit. And basically he is also blind because of his injuries of the war, and he isn't able to read his like correspondence. So the main female character is agreeing to be his like secretary. And so it's kind of the story of them getting to know each other, trying to figure out what has gone on legally with this castle, who it actually belongs to. There's kind of this whimsical, funny aspect to it where the female character is like the inspiration for these like famous stories that her father wrote, and is like a really famous, well-known, well-loved book in England at this time. And so she has like fans, like when people meet her and discover who she is, they like know the story and know that she's the inspiration. So yeah, I liked this one. I had a nice time. I had a good time. It was a little more whimsical than I was expecting, and I'm glad that I read it. At number 15, at a 3.5 star, we have Vera Wong's Guide to Snooping on a Dead Man by Jessie Q. Sutanto. This is the second book in this cozy mystery series starring Vera Wong, wwho is this she's not elderly, but she's an older Asian American woman living in San Francisco. She has a tea shop that is not very successful, but she kind of gets a new start at life when she solves this mystery in the first book, and she has this new found family of misfits that she all thought were maybe the murderer in the first book. And so the same formula kind of happens in the second book, where we have a bunch of people who might have killed someone who end up being really loved and cared for by Vera, despite the fact that they may or may not have killed someone. And this mystery is involving a missing influencer who no one knows his real name, and I really didn't like all of the influencer social media talk. It was just cringy and unpleasant to read. I just don't really like reading about that. And I thought the direction that the story went in was actually quite dark. I know murder is like an inherently dark topic, but I feel like if you are a mystery thriller reader, you're kind of like desensitized to murder happening. So it wasn't that the murder was like particularly gruesome or gory, but just one of the topics that we delved into was quite dark and unsettling, and it really made me feel a lot of negative emotions that I maybe didn't want to feel in a cozy mystery series like this. So I personally didn't like it as much as the first book, but I still enjoyed the audiobook a lot because the writing is great, it's funny, and being in Vera's head is just a lovely time. At number 14 at a 3.5 is Labyrinth's Heart by M.A. Carrick. This is the third and final book in the Rook and Rose trilogy, which is a high fantasy trilogy that has a lot to do with court politics and fashion and masked balls. A very interesting and unique magic system that has to do with dreams and geometric magic. Our main character is basically trying to con her way into one of the noble houses in this series. That's kind of the main plot. She's trying to get safety and security and money for her and her sister, and eventually flee the city again. I give the first two books 4.5 stars, and I was kind of hoping that this last book would be like 5 stars, knocked it out of the park. But I don't know, I feel like the beginning of this book like didn't really know that it was the third book in a series. Like it just didn't feel very exciting. It just felt like, yeah, another installment in the series. So I was a little bored at the beginning, and I think that really brought my enjoyment down. I liked the way that the series concluded overall, but whether it just be a personal thing or something about the writing itself, something about the plot itself, I just didn't feel the same level of excitement and intrigue in this third book. So 3.5 stars, still really enjoyed the series. It just wasn't a new all-time fave fantasy book. At number 13, at a 3.75 stars, we have Role Playing by Kathy Yardley. I chose this book because I was in a big romance mood, but I also wanted to read some books by Asian authors for AAPI Heritage Month, and I didn't know that Role Playing was written by an Asian author, and I was really excited to find that out, so I picked up the audiobook. This is a really unique romance because the two main characters are, I think they're 48 and 50, but they are like in their late 40s, early 50s for sure. And I've never read a contemporary romance with characters that old, honestly. I don't know that I've ever read one with characters older than like 35. And both of our characters are like nerds. They really like video games. Our FMC is pretty isolated. She's divorced. Her son has just gone off to college. She lives in this big house kind of in the countryside away from the town, and her son is really trying to get her to go out of her comfort zone and make some friends, and so he challenges her to like go socialize, and through her doing that, she meets the MMC, who is, I don't know, he's just a really nice, good guy. Like, he is a adult man with a solid job, with emotional intelligence. He's hot, he's a dad bod, he's nerdy, he's sweet, he's just like a great guy. I really liked these characters. If you're wanting to read contemporary romance and you're just kind of sick of the same formula and everything feeling really similar and like insta-lusty, I would highly recommend this one. I think my main complaint was that this one felt a little bit more like a contemporary novel rather than like a contemporary romance. I feel like we could have gotten a little bit more romantic scenes between the characters, or sex scenes, or romantic tension before they got together. A lot of this was just like about their lives without being directly about romance, but I still really enjoyed it. It was just short of a 4-star, and yeah, highly recommend if you're looking for something a little different in the romance genre. Coming in at number 12 at 4 stars, we have Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. This is basically about the class snobbery and the difficulties that governesses went through during this time. Agnes is an educated woman from a good family, but her family doesn't have like any money, so she can really only do one thing to like respectably earn money, and that is to be a governess. And it's interesting because although she is technically of a higher class, because she is poor and because she is an employee of these wealthier people who she's working for, the kind of situation that she's in is really precarious because she isn't respected or liked by either those above her or those below her. This one is short, it's just under 200 pages, and I think if it were any significant amount longer, I wouldn't have enjoyed this as much, but just because it was so short and sweet, and not sweet, but just because it was so short and to the point, I really enjoyed this. I thought the topics were really thought-provoking, and I wasn't expecting necessarily the direction that this went in, but I really liked it. I'm a Bronte lover, so I love all the Brontes, and will continue to read their books until I have none left, and then I will reread them, I think. At number 11, at 4 stars, we have The Princess Trap by Talia Hibbard. I read this on my Kindle as a book from Libby. I really enjoyed this, so I ended up buying this and the next book in the series, which I will talk about in a bit. These are indie romances by Talia Hibbert, who is also a traditionally published author, so these are just like older books of hers that were indie published. This is basically about this English lady and this Danish prince who have a bit of a public hookup moment, and they get caught by the press and they have to enter into this fake arranged engagement in order to protect the FMC from the press. And yeah, it's basically a fake engagement, fake marriage deal. She ends up going with him to his castle, and it's just very steamy and angsty and fun. I think Talia Hibbert does such a great job of writing really hot, steamy romances with really great writing and some interesting emotional topics without making it like too serious and too heavy. So I really enjoy this. I love Talia Hibbert. She's one of my all-time fave romance authors, and I just want to keep reading her stuff forever. At number 10, we have The Duchess Deal by Tessa Dare, which was also 4 stars. This was the first historical romance book that I read, and it is about a man who is very scarred from the war. Say it with me, everybody. I didn't mean to read 3 books. Like, literally, these were random picks that I got from Libby, and they all happened to have a man who was scarred from battle. So the next one I read definitely needs to not have that. I will need to read the synopsis. Anyway, he really needs a wife, and one day this woman walks into his study wearing a wedding dress, literally at the very moment where he's writing a letter to his like attorney to be like, I need a wife, find me any available woman. And the woman is coming into his study because his ex-fiance did not pay for the dress that she made her, and she is now about to be like evicted from her apartment, and she's like desperate, so she's trying to get his attention, storming into his house in a wedding dress. She thinks that's the only way to finally get him to respond to her. They end up getting married, and it feels like a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I don't know that it actually says that, but yeah, again, he is very like brooding and grumpy, and she is very like sweet and wholesome, and he doesn't really believe that she can be attracted to him because of his scars. And so it is them like falling in love while they are already married. I really like this. I had a really fun time. I hadn't read a historical romance in a while. I have not really scratched the surface of the genre, so I'm not saying that this is like an exceptionally good historical romance, but because it was new to me and because I hadn't read one in a while, I just had such a good time. At 4 stars, we have A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. I finally read this book. I've owned this since September of 2022. I bought this during my birthday month when I bought a shit ton of books, and I'm so excited that this finally got read. This book is really unique and hard to sum up, but basically we have a main character named Ruth who is a writer. She lives on an island in Canada in the Pacific Northwest, and it's very much like auto fiction or like meta because our author's name is Ruth and the author in the book's name is Ruth, and I'm pretty sure the husband's name is the same as her real husband. She has the same like ethnic identity, so I'm not sure how same they are supposed to be, but anyway, there is that element to it. She finds a Hello Kitty lunchbox that washed up on the shore of the beach where she lives, and she thinks that it's from Japan. There's been like a tsunami recently, and she thinks that the lunchbox has reached her across the ocean because of that. And inside is the journal of a Japanese schoolgirl who is talking about her life and her struggles with being bullied and wanting to commit suicide, and also her grandmother who is a Buddhist nun, and also her father who has tried to commit suicide multiple times. And so we are getting the journal entries of this girl, and we're also getting scenes from Ruth and her life with her husband and her life on the island. Yeah, so this is just literary magical realism type of book. Not something that I read very often, but I really enjoyed it. I listened to a lot of this on audio. A lot of times I did follow along in the book, but very unique, very well written, a lot of really interesting ideas. Definitely hard to read at times because we are talking a lot about suicide. Yeah, highly recommend if you think you can handle the subject matter and you're looking for something more literary. She is a very, very talented author for sure. At number 8, we have My Lady Jane at 4 stars. I read this so long ago that I'm like, what was this even about? This book is basically a mix of fantasy and adventure and historical romance. We have our main character Jane, who is being forced to marry this guy that she doesn't know. She doesn't want to marry him, and once she does marry him, she finds out that he can turn into a horse. Yes, we have this world in which some people can turn into animals, and there is a lot of political persecution of these people. There are certain people, certain political parties who want to exterminate them. And Jane is actually the cousin of the King of England. And so there's like a lot of political maneuvering and scheming. Obviously, we have the fantasy element of people turning into animals, and we have the romance element of Jane and her husband, whose name escapes me, falling in love, and it's just very fun, very humorous. I listened to this entirely on audio. I thought the audiobook quality like wasn't good. It was like an old, not very well produced audiobook, but the narrator was excellent. She had the perfect tone of voice for like a funny, like doesn't take itself seriously kind of like British humor that this book had. Really good, really fun, refreshing, and unique. I'm really glad I read it. I did DNF the second book in the series, but the books like aren't connected at all, so I might try different books by this author trio. I think there's 3 authors. I didn't say the authors' names. I'm sorry, I don't remember them. It'll be on the screen. Whew, okay, I've been talking too much. At number 7, at 4 stars, we have Soulless. This is by Gail Carriger, and I had such a fun time with this paranormal historical romance. This one also has a bit of a humorous tone, but it is also a very fun romance. So our main character is at a party one day. She sneaks away to the library just to get away from everyone, and there is a vampire in the library, and he is acting very strangely. He tries to kill her. She ends up killing him. And she is part of a group of people called the Soulless who don't have a soul. And because of this, she can actually negate the powers of paranormal creatures such as vampires and werewolves, who are the main paranormal creatures. We also have ghosts, but ghosts aren't really a big part of the story. This is a series, so I don't know if the ghosts will come into play more later. So it seems that there is some illegal vampire activity going on. There are pretty strict rules set up by the like paranormal side of the government about how the vampire like hives are supposed to function, and it seems like something dangerous is going on, and so she is kind of teaming up with this werewolf bureaucrat guy to figure out what's going on. And he is very sexy and grumpy and attracted to her, and it's really interesting because she is like half Italian, and so the whole book is like talking about how ugly she is by like the standards of the time, but like you as the reader understand that like being tan and like having a big nose and like black hair doesn't make you ugly. And this werewolf guy is like completely like smitten with her and like doesn't think she's ugly at all, so that's like another fun element. I just had so much fun with this. Such a good time if you're looking for just a fun book that's completely unserious. Books 6, 5, and 4 are all part of the same series. I actually left one of the books in the other room, but first we have The Name of All Things by Jen Lyons, then we have The Memory of Souls, and then we have The Ruin of Kings, which is number 4. So I gave book 1 4.5 stars, book 2 is 4 stars, and book 3 is 4.5 stars. This is a high epic fantasy series that features gods and prophecies, empire, different climates, and different races of people, some of whom are immortal, some of whom used to be immortal. In the first book, we have a lot about like slavery and working in brothels. We also have different monsters and creatures. It's just so amazing. There are so many really wonderful characters. There's so much going on. The glossaries are like 10 pages. You have to look at the glossary sometimes. It's so complex and wonderful. I'm having such a good time with this series. In the first book, we have our main character, Kieran, who is a musician at a brothel with his father. They are, you know, poor, regular people, and he finds out that he is a long-lost prince, and after this, he is kind of thrust into the crazy political maneuverings of the what are they called? Like the royal houses. And he also discovers that he might be an integral part of either saving or destroying the world. Alright, now we have our 3 5-star books. So Coming in at number 3, we have Savor It by Tara DeWitt. This is a contemporary romance novel that takes place in Washington or Oregon, I believe, in the Pacific Northwest. And our main character is a teacher. She is like on this like hobby farm that she inherited from her parents, and it's summertime, so she isn't working, and her neighbors actually rent out their home a lot. And so she has this new neighbor who's gonna be there for the summer, and he is a hot chef who is coming from New York City to help start this new restaurant in town. And with him is his niece, who is a teenager, who he is her legal guardian now because her parents passed away. And so we're just watching them like enjoy the summer together, get to know each other. They both have their own, you know, personal struggles that they're dealing with. It's such a beautiful setting. Like, I loved the small town setting and the hobby farm. I loved all the descriptions of food. And there's this like local contest that's really important to our main character. He's like helping her with it, even though it's like doesn't mean anything to him. They're like training for this competition, and they're like canoeing together. It's the first contemporary romance that I've given 5 stars in quite a while. I just really had no complaints. I had such a good time with it. It was everything I wanted from a small town setting, from a Pacific Northwest setting, even though I've never been there. And I just really loved it, and I'm really excited to read the second book in the series that just came out. Okay, my camera died, but I'm back to talk about book number 2, which is The Roommate Risk by Talia Hibbert. This book is about Jasmine and Raul, and they became really good friends in college, and Raul has been smitten with her since the beginning. They kind of had this one single night together, and then they decided to just be friends. And Jasmine is very emotionally unavailable because of some trauma that she has, and so Raul has tried really, really hard to not be in love with her. And they were like separated for a while, and he was like in another city, and he just can't get her out of his head. He can't stop being in love with her. And Jasmine is very much like emotionally unavailable. Like I said, she is not like consciously in love with Raul. And one day her apartment floods and she has nowhere to go, and so Raul obviously lets her move in with him as his roommate for a couple months while her apartment is getting fixed. This is dual POV, so you get to see the angst and yearning from Raul's point of view while he's trying to obviously stay respectful and trying to tamp down his feelings. And you're also seeing Jasmine deal with the feelings in a very different way and, you know, slowly start to realize the truth and fall for him even more, and how attracted she is to him and how stressful that is to her because they're just friends. And there's just so much at stake here because they are such good friends and they both have these emotional things they have to work through. This is such a steamy, good time. It is so emotional. It is such a good balance of those two things. It's also deeply romantic and fun and angsty, and exactly the sort of high stakes friends to lovers book that I love. People say that friends to lovers books are like boring and that they don't like that trope, but for me, when it's done well, the stakes are so high because it's not just some random guy that you just started dating and that's all he is to you. It's like, this is your close friend, and if things go poorly, you have lost not only a romantic partner but a best friend. I loved Raul, I loved Jasmine, but definitely I think Raul like really, really made the book for me. And this is just an excellent romance. This is exactly like my taste in romance, and Talia Hibbert just did it again for me with a 5-star romance. Highly, highly recommend. Probably my favorite romance of this year so far. I don't know, I'll have to reevaluate, but definitely a new fave. And then coming in at number 1, my favorite book of both April and May is One that I actually pulled from my TBR jar for a TBR jar reading vlog. I will link that down below if you're interested in seeing the books that I read for that and how I felt about them. And that is actually East of Eden by John Steinbeck. This is objectively the best book out of all of these, and it is also one that I really, really enjoyed. Sometimes I read a classic or a book, a literary type book, and I can, you know, understand that objectively it's very intellectual and well done and unique and deep and whatever, but not actually enjoy my time reading it or not actually want to be reading it. But this one really had both. It was enjoyable, it was entertaining and compelling and interesting to me, and it was also just like I was in awe of the craft of this book. And it's really nice to read a classic where you have those two things, because oftentimes it is one or the other. This really follows two families, the Trasks and the Hamiltons, and I would say it's about one family more than it is about the other. Most of it takes place in California and the Salinas Valley, and it is a lot about just humans being humans and relationships, money, family, love, betrayal, jealousy. It is really, really fascinating. There is a evil woman character in this book that I thought was so fascinating, and I would love to, honestly, I would love for a modern, like a contemporary literary giant to write a book inspired by this evil woman character in here. Or like I still haven't really like went out and read a like scholarly article about this book, but I've been meaning to since I read it. I just want to read like a literary analysis of, I think her name is Kathy, I could be wrong, but yeah, this evil woman character was my favorite part of this book, and every time she was on the page I was just so fascinated. And also like just thinking about like John Steinbeck's intentions in writing her and probably what he thought of her versus like what I think of her, and you know, the conclusions that I can draw about her from like a more feminist perspective that I'm not sure that John Steinbeck had in 1950 whatever when he wrote this. This book is not without fault. There is some racism in here. This book is not like a perfect, unproblematic book, I will say. So if you are not wanting to read a classic that has any sort of racism in it, I would skip this one. But it is certainly a fascinating book, and I think you can learn a lot from it and think a lot while reading this, after reading this. It's a book that a lot of people really love, and I'm really happy that I was one of the people who loved it. Hopefully I didn't miss any books. Those are all the books that I read in April and May. I think I will probably get my June wrap up out like in early July, hopefully, so that I don't have to double up again. But I do like ranking all of these books. It's kind of fun for me. So let me know if you have thoughts on any of these books. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an absolutely lovely week.